All right, welcome back. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Ryan Bethencourt. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kent.
Thank you so much for doing this.
It's a pleasure.
Ryan is, by the way, I kind of do the Larry King thing a little bit on the intros, where, you know, the Larry King where he was like, I come to my interviews not knowing anything so I can learn along.
Yep.
Like, you're lazy, man. You're not doing prep. Like, hi, Robert De Niro. What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
I think. But Ryan is the CEO, and so I'll just say this, and whatever I get wrong, you can correct. Yeah. Ryan is the CEO of Wild Earth, a partner at Babel Ventures, the founder of Indiebio, which is a biotech, maybe an incubator, a biotech group here in San Francisco. We can explain that. Went to Cambridge University, probably applied to Northwestern, couldn't get in.
That's right.
And you're also on day 3 or 4 of a 5-day fast.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's going well, actually, surprisingly well.
What's the idea?
So the idea was I wanted to, so there's a lot of research around longevity and fasting and health benefits in terms of recycling old cells and old proteins that actually happens. And so I wanted to try it out myself. I'd only ever done 24-hour fasts. Yeah. And so now I'm pretty much into my 3rd day of a 5-day fast, and not only is it great for weight loss, but it has a whole bunch of other longevity benefits as well.
How do you feel?
I actually feel functional.
Yeah,
so
really?
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see if I forget anything during the discussion.
We'll compare this to another podcast of yours where you didn't.
Where I didn't fast.
Yeah, I just listened to one yesterday where I forgot who the guy was, but he was clearly a scientist. Like, he was clearly a scientist who had kind of done all the research on health, and he had this idea of health compounding over your lifetime like interest.
Yes.
And so I forget what he called it, but his idea wasn't like how long you live, but how long you live healthy.
Yes.
And his point was kind of that nobody just got heart disease and died. Mm-hmm. And just like interest, like, you know, it's worth nothing. And then also, like, all these things through your life happen. You eat a certain way, whatever, and then you turn to a certain age, and all of a sudden it all kind of comes a cropper.
Yep.
Like, you don't have the muscle mass, and you break your hip, and you're, you know, in really serious trouble.
Yeah.
And a big part of what he talked about was the fasting stuff.
Yep.
Both like what you're doing, and then I think a version where within a day he would only eat for like 8 hours or something like that.
Yeah, so that's intermittent fasting. So that I actually have done intermittent fasting. I like it. I think it's great. But in terms of, you know, sheer discipline, like, this is kind of an interesting experience for me. Yeah. Just eating nothing, right? Yeah. So it's a water diet.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about coffee?
I have a little coffee every once, but it's black coffee. So black coffee or tea.
So how did you come to this? We're in Silicon Valley. Everybody's working on a chat app, an enterprise, something.
Yep.
Maybe even a quantum computing, but things that are based at the core in silicon. And I know how kids get into that. They play video games and they start. How does one come to biotech? How did that happen?
So I do carbon, right? Yeah. So versus silicon, carbon is my substrate of choice. And so I think that, you know, from my background, I was, and I know that we've talked about a little bit of science fiction. I was always inspired by a lot of the science fiction that I read growing up, and I wondered how we could make that real. And as I was growing up, it was the heydays of genomics. When I graduated my first degree, we'd sequenced the first human genome. So that was in 2000. So I'm dating myself.
That was like the Craig Ventnor
That was the Craig Ventnor thing, when he competed with literally the entire world to sequence one human genome.
Yeah.
And he kind of won. Yeah. And so kind of meaning, like, I think Bill Clinton actually asked Craig Ventnor not to win, and then he slowed it down, and they co-won. Basically.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. I remember that.
You remember that?
And then it was a little like, the word's not anticlimactic exactly, but I thought that cancer was cured like the next day.
Yep.
And it didn't seem like it was.
I think a lot of us did. So back at the time, we were like, okay, well, there's about 100,000 genes. Once we sequence the human genome, that's it. We know everything. It turns out that we basically picked up a book which had words in it, but we were illiterate. Right. We hardly understood the book. And so that was the book of life, and we hardly understood it. And so to me, it became like this fascinating problem. It's like, okay, well, how do we understand us? Yeah. And so scientists have literally spent their entire lifetimes trying to decode individual genes or proteins and what they do. And so as, you know, I would say over the last 20 years, when we've been talking about Moore's Law and how it's accelerating computation and technology, what it's also been doing is it's been accelerating other industries that are aligned. So biotech being one of them. So robotics, faster computing time, faster compute unlocks protein modeling and a whole bunch of other stuff. So robotics unlocks rapid progress in the lab.
And it seems, well, why don't we talk about Indiebio first? I'm just fascinated by a whole bunch of this stuff.
Yeah, so we'll roll back. So so I got into the biotech industry. I was working with a lot of big pharma companies, helping them develop their drugs. I kind of worked my way up, started in pharmaceutical sales, and then went into clinical research. And then in 2008, the Great Recession hit. All of a sudden, all the companies I was working with started to go bankrupt, and there was this big problem.
Yeah.
And we weren't moving forward on science. But I looked across and noticed that there were a bunch of tech companies, startups, back in 2000 that were just getting off the ground for like tens of thousands of dollars or thousands of dollars. I was like, why can't we do this in science?
Yeah.
Like, it seems bizarre at the time. It's hard, it's kind of hard to remember for some of us that weren't heavily involved in biotech. But it took millions of dollars to start a biotech company. Yeah. And typically you were a PhD, MD, PhD, MBA who had built a company before, and now you're getting funded by VCs to, tens of millions of dollars just to explore this one area of science. And I was like, science doesn't have to be that expensive.
Right.
And so myself and a whole bunch of others eventually started what we now call the biohacker movement. Yeah. And so that was building low-cost labs. So
okay.
that led to...
So it's not the other biohacker.
No, not the other biohacker.
The Tim Ferriss biohacker.
Yeah, not the Tim Ferriss biohacker. It's like, I love the fact that Tim Ferriss can hack himself in all sorts of ways, his body. But this is about hacking science and lowering the cost of doing science. So we started to build labs at first in our houses, in our garages. And then eventually we started to build communal labs. And so BioCurious was the first. Counterculture Labs I helped co-found with a whole bunch of other people. And then myself and Ron, my co-founder, Ron Shigeta, he and I co-founded Berkeley Biolabs, which was an incubator. And we came across this great venture firm called SOS Ventures that had done accelerators. And we went and pitched both Sean O'Sullivan and Arvin, who's a partner over there at SOS Ventures, on the idea of building a biotech accelerator. They'd already been thinking along those lines. Yeah. They'd started a test already in Ireland. And so we basically joined forces and started what's now called Indiebio.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And Indiebio just had a demo day yesterday, didn't it?
Yes.
How did it go?
It went well. It was, I think it's the 7th demo day.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I think over a little under 100 companies have been funded through Indiebio. It's amazing. So our mission from the beginning was to help scientists become entrepreneurs. And so, thinking about this 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of people, even in Silicon Valley, were very skeptical that scientists could become entrepreneurs.
Right.
They were like, scientists study science to go and hang out in the lab and just, explore archaic things in biology for forever. Right. And we really had this vision that with government investment declining, the only way to move science forward was to start building startups. Yep. Right. And at the time, it was a really crazy idea. We actually had to build a lab to support these companies and these entrepreneurs. But now it's kind of seen as an accepted thing to do.
And so you're involved in the biotech world in a couple of other ways. So you founded this called a community.
Yep.
You're the CEO of Wild Earth, which is an amazing thing, and a partner in a venture firm.
Yes.
Yeah, leave some jobs for some other people. We'll start with Babel Ventures and what that is.
Yeah. So my general rule of thumb is if I can, I say yes. Yeah, right. And good. So I'm willing to put as much time as I need to put in. I mean, I live, breathe, and eat biotech. That's mostly all that I do. And so Babel Ventures, Barbara from Babel Ventures, she's an amazing entrepreneur. She actually approached me I would say probably about 2 years ago. Yeah. I met her about 2 or 3 years ago, and she came to Indiebio. Yeah. And she was a very unusual investor, right? Yeah. So she was very Brazilian, came in I think it was leather pants and high heels into the lab.
Yeah, and if you don't know who this person is, we'll have her on the podcast. If we
can Barbara Manuzzi,
her. Barbara Manuzzi, she's just this incredible, like an immigrant from Brazil, has built a couple, in Silicon Valley where it is not super common for women to run venture capital firms. She's founded and is the GP in 2 of them.
Yes.
Look up Barbara Manuzzi, but you
she's
won't spend
amazing.
Too much time. It's a really cool person and a cool story.
And she's a phenomenon because she is a founder, right? Yes. So she herself is a founder. She was a fashion entrepreneur, then moved into the construction industry, followed her customers into construction from Sao Paulo up to Miami, started to realize that her customers needed ways to deploy capital, her high net worth customers, and then she started to create venture funds.
Yeah, classic. Like such an entrepreneur. Of
super
course.
entrepreneur. So she is a super entrepreneur. She's already very famous in Brazil. I think she'll become increasingly famous in the U.S. Based on what she's done. And so anyway, so long story short, she kind of came to Indiebio. She was like, "What is this? What are you guys doing here in this basement? You know, in the Tenderloin." And so we were like, "Well, you know, we're building biotech." And she was like, "Tell me more about it. I like the idea of biotech." And so we started to talk frequently. She came and invested in one or two companies at Indiebio. She was very interested in learning more about biotech. And over the period of years where we became friends, I would teach her about biotech. And in the end, when I told her that I was leaving Indiebio to start a company, she basically said, "Well, why don't you join me as a partner? It's okay if you have a full-time gig. We'll build infrastructure so that we can support that. But I'd like to work with you and I'd like to invest with you."
Yeah.
And so that was really appealing to me. So I could actually start a business, which is what I really wanted to do. That was really the driver of why I've left Indiebio. I mean, we built 67 companies, and a lot of them were very successful and very interesting companies. And I kind of wanted to do it again.
And you pay, and the one, tell us about the one you did, which is Wild Earth.
Yeah, so Wild Earth, it's a little bit of an unusual company. So for those of you that don't know Indiebio and some of the companies that we backed companies like Memphis Meats. Yeah. We're the first investor in Memphis Meats. They made the first cultured meat meatball. Yeah. It was kind of globally famous. We also backed Finless Foods, which was cultured meat. We backed a company called The Not Co., which is transforming plant-based foods in Latin America, started in Santiago, Chile, by some great entrepreneurs over there, Matthias and the whole team, and Cami. And so we really started to see this whole alternative future of food space. About 30% of what we invested in was future food. The other 70% was classical biotech, so like regenerative medicine, cancer therapeutics. But the interest in the future of food was just so high that I was kind of inspired by that. And I was thinking, okay, well, where else do we have sustainability issues, ethical issues, food safety issues? And I'm a big animal lover myself. And so I've had and fostered lots of dogs, a couple of cats when I was growing up. And so I looked at their food and I was like, their food is terrible. And the more I looked into it, I was like, okay, well, it's just waste meat. Yeah. And it turned out that wasn't the case. That it was actually, yes, it was waste meat, but there were also things like the FDA allows euthanasia drugs in dog food, like a certain amount of euthanasia drugs in some dog foods. They have like a maximum amount of euthanasia drug you can have in their meat. And so their meat is contaminated. And so I was like, well, so how do we replace this meat? We can make it more sustainable. We can make it cleaner. The most important thing is cleaner. There've been plastic found in dog food too, all sorts of weird stuff. And I kept wanting this idea to go away. So I tried to kill it multiple times because I didn't want to be the dog food guy, right? I was like, I'm this biotech guy. I'm building biotech, and now I'm looking at dog food, and I was like, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it?
Right.
And I was like, do I care about the animals? Yes. Do I care about the animals that our furry friends like dogs and cats? Yes. Do I want to make their lives better? Yes. Do I care about the farm animals that are being abused and suffering in factory farms? Yes. Right. Do I care about sustainability? Yes. Mm-hmm. And so when I looked at the data, it was even more shocking. That's really what pushed me into action. 30% of the meat that we consume in the U.S. is our pets. Right. 30%.
Interesting.
Right? So 30%. This is not waste. This is like a mixture of like premium stuff. I mean, we're even killing kangaroos and kangaroos and crocodiles to feed them to our pets.
To get enough meat.
Wow. Right? And so this is really crazy. This is actually a problem in Australia where we're literally killing all the wild kangaroos to feed them to our pets.
Wow. And what kind of dog do you have?
Oh, so I foster. So I foster 10 dogs so far.
Okay, so it's like a different one every week.
A different one every week. Yeah. So the one that's probably coming over is a husky. Yeah. So new husky foster. I actually foster with a great no-kill shelter in East Oakland. Okay. And it's called Rocket Dog.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Rocket Dog. I love Rocket Dog.
That's
like they'll take any. I mean, they'll take any dog. And so I've been.
I have a friend who does Muttville, which is like the senior dogs.
By the way, I love Muttville.
Those guys are great.
I follow Muttville. I love Muttville. I love senior dogs. Yeah. So I know that they're. I mean, sadly, when they get less active and less like.
But that's perfect for some people.
Totally perfect.
There's a lot of people who don't need a puppy running around their house.
Totally.
So they want something a little.
Something a little more relaxed. A little more relaxed. I mean, potty training. Yeah. You can do it, but it gets old sometimes. Cleaning up the mess.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So what? So what this pet, like, what does the dog think of the
Yeah.
pet
So
food? Like,
so basically, the main vision that I had and the realization that I had was, well, okay, I was thinking about clean meat replacing the meat that we currently put in pet food. And so clean meat is basically lab grown meat. But the price isn't there. And so we're probably at least 5 years out before it gets to a competitive price point for pets. But my co-founder, Ron, would always drive me crazy. He's been growing koji, which is a type of fungi that's used to make miso soup, soy sauce. He's been growing it for marinades for literally years. Like, I remember him in the lab at Berkeley Biolabs growing koji. And he would literally grow koji because he would use it for food. So he'd do food experiments. And the koji would grow so quickly that sometimes it'd contaminate other experiments in the refrigerator. We didn't have much money. I mean, we built that lab with $100,000, right? Yeah. So we really didn't have any money. And so we had to have all these experiments together. And I was like racking my brain. I was like, how could we solve this? I thought, what about fungi? What about koji? Right. And turns out koji is high in protein. It's about 50% protein compared to steak, which is about 30% protein. So it's higher than steak in terms of protein, and it has all the amino acids dogs need. Right. And so it just clicked, and I was like, wait, this is sustainable. We can brew it in the same way we brew miso and soy sauce. Right. We can do that. We can just modernize the whole process. Yeah. And so that's really what led to this idea of sustainable, delicious dog food. Turns out that the koji flavor, that savory taste in the miso, dogs love it too. Right. So we love it, and dogs love it too. It kind of makes sense.
So what is this whole thing? So in biotech, my experience with biotech has always been there's some company, they're huge, they're called Amgen or something. Yep. They work on something for 20 years, and it cures something. Yeah. But, unless you have that thing, you don't really know what they're doing. All of a sudden, though, here in San Francisco, there is on the shelf, there is in restaurants, a biotech, I guess, product like Impossible Meat. Totally. Which is I've had it in hamburger form. Yep. It sure tastes like a hamburger to me. Mm-hmm. The people who are the first interesting thing is that it exists. Yes. In the same way that Snapchat, it's real. Exists. Yeah. What are people trying to accomplish with this? Like, okay, that tastes like a hamburger to me. Yeah. I could eat that instead of a hamburger. Yeah. Is it a health thing? Is it for the animals? Yeah. What is it?
I think it's a mix. Right. It's a mix of things. So I think it's, it really is a big tent. So I've talked to lots of people that love Impossible Burgers. Mm-hmm. They have the Beyond Burgers. Most of them, by the way, are not vegan or vegetarian. They just love the taste. Yeah. And they love the fact that it's healthier, right? Less cholesterol. It's better for the planet from a sustainability perspective. Right. And, factory farming is not involved. Yep. And for the longest time, I think one of the interesting insights is that for the longest time, food and biotech did not mix. So after Monsanto came out and basically said, hey, we're going to make a few more pennies genetically modifying your corn and your soy, everyone rebelled against that and said, no GMOs. And what we're finding now is this new generation of GMOs are actually better for the planet, better for you, and better for animals. Yeah. And that's powerful. Right. Now people are like, oh, wait a minute. It has benefits for me and for things that I care about. I'm willing to look at the science behind the GMOs and make my own decisions.
Yeah, and that's always been the weirdest, one of the most uneducated sort of things is like when I grew up, we would splice plants together. Like, wasn't I genetically modifying things?
You kind of were. You were creating hybrids. You were creating hybrids, two different genetic stocks.
I mean, I think it's just that when Monsanto does something, you just assume it's like not in your, particularly in your best interest.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So, I mean, how quickly can or should or will this move? Like, I go to my restaurant in San Francisco and get it. Yeah. But is there a time when like somebody with the big not dairy farms, but the big meat farms is impacted by this? Or
so we're already seeing this, right? So really, when we're talking about the new biotech, right? So the biotech that we're really pioneering in Silicon Valley, but now it's spreading globally. It's about applying biotech to everything. So biotech affects every aspect of our lives. We are biotech. So from a programming, physical matter perspective, biology is the most effective way of creating things and reprogramming physical reality. Right? And so we're moving into what a lot of people call the fourth industrial revolution, which is the meld of robotics, artificial intelligence, software, and biology. Right. Once we start to understand ourselves and we understand biology, it's an alien technology that we evolved out of, and that now we're starting to understand.
Yeah.
Which has, I mean, it is nanomolecular biotechnology. That is real. It's not fake. Like, these are the products we eat. These are by the way, the laundry detergents that we use.
Yeah.
The reason why we no longer have red Tide, which is a huge environmental disaster, is because Tide and those other companies are engineering enzymes. They're genetically engineering enzymes that are better at cleaning our clothes for us. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Right?
That is incredible.
Yeah. So where we're going, I think, is we've already seen it. So we've seen changes already. If you look at something which is a little bit less high tech, more food science than biotech at the moment, but dairy.
Yeah.
So the dairy industry is being transformed. Sadly, many farmers are being affected by this, but we're seeing 5-10% declines per year in milk purchases. So cow-based milk.
Right.
What we're seeing an uptick is massive surges in plant-based milks.
Right.
Surging up. Plant and nut-based milks are just surging. Almond milk, hemp milk, a lot of these, and most of these people are making decisions because they just like these products better.
Right. And so with the pet, by the way, why aren't more people in the pet market? It seems like in Silicon Valley, there have been $1 billion of everything. There's one dog walking company that someone creates, WAG, and it's like the biggest company.
Yeah.
Like, what an amazing market! Like, animal, the amount of money people put into their pets. I mean,
it's huge.
It's insane.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense, but it's
so it's a really interesting question. So back when we were building a whole bunch of different biotechs in different industries, I started to realize this pattern. When you walk into an industry and you're like, why isn't someone doing this? And you don't see anyone else doing it. Often that's, and I know, Kent, you've had a lot of experience with this, especially in the social media world. You walk in, you go, someone should have done this. Not me, someone else, like someone who knows more, who understands this industry better. And often that's just, the answer is, you should be doing this. Yeah. Right? For whatever reason, it doesn't really matter why it's not happening, you should be doing it. It's harder, it's more work. So the pet space, that was really interesting. So I pitched a bunch of VCs across Silicon Valley, and it reminded me of the early days of Indiebio. I got lots of no's. When I was talking about building a biotech fund or a biotech accelerator, a lot of people told me no. A lot of Silicon Valley investors. I won't name them, but let's just say most that I talked to were like, hey, I like the idea. Can you remove the lab? And I was like, that's not the point. We need a lab to do science. But I did the same thing. And even after all of the companies were able to get off the ground and build that were successful at Indiebio, I got a lot of no's. Yeah. And they were like, we just don't like the pet space. Do something in human food. If you do something in human food, we'll fund you. If you do something in the pet space, we're not going to fund you. And then I came across a bunch of great impact investors who backed our mission. But then Felicis Ventures, the team at Felicis Ventures, Aiden and Sonia, and the whole team really loved the idea of the pet space. They got it. And there was another investor that came across who I'd known for a couple of years. I never worked with him directly, who got it immediately, and that was Peter Thiel. Yeah. And that was a surprise to me. So I had probably a 45-minute meeting with Peter. He was incredibly hard to get hold of. He canceled a bunch of times. I'm sure he was super busy. And I was like, well, let me just talk to Peter, see what he thinks. He's like, what are you doing now? And I was like, well, I'm building this pet food company. And he stopped me and he was like, keep going. I love the pet space. Yeah. And that was a response. I was basically getting the opposite response from almost all of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I don't know why. There's clearly a ton of money in it.
Yep.
There's a weird kind of low risk thing because if you kill an animal, it's terrible, but it's not a $10 million thing. And there's clearly, you're competing with Purina, who maybe is not the most innovative company on the planet.
Nope.
Good for Felicis. Like Peter Thiel.
And Peter Thiel and Founders Fund and Thiel Capital, but and a whole bunch of other impact investors. But it is interesting. And so when you look at this market, you look at it and you go, and I think the reason that people are saying it's not interesting because it doesn't feel like a deep science, deep tech play. It doesn't feel like it feels trivial, right? So a lot of people, I think the feedback I got is like, this is a trivial market, go after something real and deep. And for me, I'm like, well, this is probably one of the deepest areas we can go into. It's understanding nutrition and how to feed dogs, cats, any species well. Like, how do we survive and thrive? And this links back into the concept you were talking about earlier, health span, right? Like, why are so many dogs and cats dying of cancer?
Yeah, why are they?
We don't fully know, but I have a thesis. I have a hypothesis.
That is interesting because I think about the number of everyone I know, every pet they get is a rescue. So who the heck knows what's gone on with these animals? Yeah. But man, a lot of them have tumors and conditions, neurological conditions, and by the way, my friends spend a ton of money. Not rich friends, just any friends.
People who love their dog or love their cat, and they're willing to do whatever it is because they're a family member.
Yeah.
And so this was for me. This triviality was like, this is not trivial. Like these are sentient, loving creatures. I want to help them, and in that path, we can help ourselves too. We can learn a lot about nutrition and biology and help them. And so when I started to look into the whole pet space, I realized like dogs can live 30 years. I don't know if you knew this.
No.
I
thought they lived like between 15 and 19 years.
Yeah, they can live 30 years.
Wow.
And so the question is, why are they dying in their early teens?
Right.
And I don't think anyone has a good answer for that. And I have a hypothesis. I have a thesis, a view on the world, which is that the quality of their food is so bad. The fact that there have been contaminants like euthanasia drugs, like plastics, which we know are carcinogenic. Right. If we were to eat a bunch of plastic, imagine if we're eating a bunch of plastic wrapping and a bunch of other plastic garbage, we would probably get sick.
Yeah.
In theory, it should increase our risk of cancer because plastic is carcinogenic. And so I have this theory that it's the food. It's the food that is making our pets sicker.
Right. So let me ask you this. Feeding an animal, a dog, like a vegan diet.
Yes.
Or not meat.
Yes.
Is that okay? Like, would that happen naturally? Like, or you want to take these a more provocative one, like a kid.
Yes.
Like, should you feed your kid vegan? Like, I grew up on hot dogs and orange soda pop, so
And by the way, I'm with you, Ken. I grew up on hamburgers from McDonald's.
So, but is it okay? Like, because in the wild, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd be eating meat.
Yep.
Like, what do you think about that?
So dogs are true omnivores. So it's really important to dispel this myth that dogs are wolves, right? So the latest scientific research that we looked at is that dogs have evolved for the last roughly 100,000 years. We used to think it was 10,000 years, but roughly 100,000 years right next to us.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and so what's happened is there was a study published a couple of years ago in a scientific journal called Nature, super interesting. It looked at the difference between dogs and wolves. Dogs, their genes are different. Their genes for starch metabolism, so for exactly the carbohydrates we love, right? It's no surprise that when we're eating like, I don't know, potato chips or French fries, dogs love French fries, right? They love sweet potatoes. Like they love these starchy type things.
French fries are delicious.
They're delicious. It turns out that it appears that we have co-evolved. So there's a deep link between us and our pets, and then linking that with us, right? Yeah. Can a human be vegan? Can a child be vegan?
Yeah.
So I'm a biologist. I go to biology. Yeah. Right? I always go to biology, and I'm like, okay, well, let's look at it. How many primates eat mostly plants? The vast majority of primates. There's some exceptions, like if you look at chimpanzees are opportunistic meat eaters. That's probably what we were.
Right.
We mostly ate plants, so fruits, vegetables, various other things, and then occasionally if we get a piece of meat, we eat the piece of meat.
Yeah.
But
and not very regularly. Probably.
Not very regularly. Very rarely, in fact.
I mean, anything regular. Well, I guess plants you could eat every day.
Plant you could eat every day.
Yeah.
Plants you could eat every day. And when you look at primates in the wild, you look at gorillas, you look at chimpanzees, that's exactly what they do. They're eating plants every day. Fruits, plants, every day.
Right.
So primates are mostly plant-based. They're mostly herbivorous, but we're omnivores, so we can eat a bit of meat. Yes.
What an incredible sector to be working in.
Yeah, it's a lot
so
of fun.
How are the animals doing with the dogs? What product are you starting with?
So we launched. So when we started Wild Earth, our vision and our mission was really to show the world that hey, we could bring cultured proteins to the market, these clean foods and clean proteins to the market quickly.
Yep.
And so it took us about a year. I actually thought it would be quicker than it was.
It was ever thus.
Yes, ever thus.
Yes.
So manufacturing, there were a whole bunch of manufacturing. Product prototyping, testing. We tested about 50 different versions of our treat. Mm-hmm. So with hundreds of dogs, we tested, and these were all volunteer studies. So the pet parents would actually volunteer for the pets. This is actually another piece. So as I started to dig deeper into the pet food industry, I realized something really kind of shocking, which was that it is not cruelty-free. And so when I say cruelty-free, I mean big conventional pet food companies are doing animal tests on dogs and cats in labs.
Ah, right.
And they do some pretty gruesome ones too. They do digestibility studies where they stick stuff down a beagle's throat and then pull it out at timed intervals. Mm-hmm. And this is a beagle that lives and dies in a lab.
Right.
And for those of us that are animal lovers, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it's not cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I think California, we just banned animal testing for cosmetics.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we buying products, and why are we developing products testing on dogs and cats in labs?
Right.
And so that was our mission, to remove all of that testing. We were successful in doing that. We had some issues at first because the industry really relies on these tests. So we had to find a way. We partnered with some universities. We actually reached out to PETA for regulatory advice, like what could we do?
And does anything regulate pet food?
It does. So we're regulated at 3 different levels. So we're regulated by the FDA.
Okay.
We're regulated by local states. So it's a bit different to human food. Human food is just regulated by the FDA. We're regulated by both the FDA, local states, and then a quasi-public-private partnership, which is called AFCO. So there's multiple levels of regulation. So there's some things that can move faster and some things that move slower in the pet food space. So go ahead.
Do you have a product out there now?
We do, yeah. So we just launched our first product. So our first product is a treat. So it's a snack. It's a functional snack. Yeah. So it's actually a prebiotic, and it has omega-3s and 6s as well. The main aim of the treat is, one, it's actually to give pets the taste of koji. So dogs really love the taste of koji. So we tested this. 90% of the dogs that we've tested on love it, eat it. No problem.
Can I get it somewhere?
You can. It's online. It's online.
What's it called?
So wildearth.com.
Yep.
So wildearth.com, and it's right there. And what we'll do is maybe we'll put together like a special code for the show.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes. But I can order it, and do I go to a pet store? Does it come to my house?
It goes straight to your house. Okay. So delivered straight to your house is what's called direct to consumer. So we're doing a lot of direct to consumer work. We're building some partnerships with some local pet food stores.
Can I subscribe to it, kind of thing?
You can, yeah. So
that is the coolest. We got a friend of ours, my girlfriend's mom actually has a Vizsla. It's a very active dog. They live on a farm. And we got one of those boxes that comes regularly. Yeah. And a Vizsla tears every toy apart in like a week. But it's so cool, like just getting that box, and the dog knows when it's coming. Like, so
they get excited. Yeah,
I love that, being able to subscribe to a dog treat.
Yeah, dog treat.
So cool.
So we think that's a whole category. And so our focus is really on making a better product. So we're starting with dog treats. So these products are functional as well. So especially for dogs that have like digestive issues. Yeah. We have prebiotics. The product koji itself and the product has prebiotics. And so what we've done, we actually did a small study, a 10 dog study, and we found that it increased good microbial diversity. So nutshell, and this is not statistically significant yet, but in a nutshell, what it basically did is the poops were not too hard, not too soft. Yeah. Right. Perfect. So it was perfect. Like that's kind of what you want, right? Yeah. When you're going around picking up, picking up poops, you want them to be easy to pick up, but you want your dog to be able to go, to be healthy to go. Yeah. And that's for many of us that are pet guardians, pet parents. You want to make sure like the poop is often how you check to see if your dog's doing well or not. Right. Like when they poop, you're like, okay, they're doing well.
They're fine. Yeah.
They're doing fine. If there's something with the poop, something wrong, some diarrhea, or they're having constipation, then you know that's a sign that they're not doing that well. Yeah.
And how do the dogs like it so far?
They love it so far. So we're starting to get reviews in. So we're starting to put them on the website. What we're finding is that koji taste, that umami taste, is something really unique. Mm-hmm. It's a flavor that dogs surprisingly also love just as much as we do.
Right.
And what's ended up happening is even picky dogs, they really like it. And so sometimes, we've had some feedback and some reviews from pet parents who have very picky dogs, who tend to not eat very much. Yep. And for them, it's a great way of just giving them a little extra treat, especially older dogs as well.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's great actually.
Well, what else as a biotech investor, venture capitalist? What else is one of the things about biotech that I've made fun of in the past is medicine doesn't seem to be solving problems at the same rate that tech is, like diseases do not seem to be going away at a really phenomenal rate. And a lot of times you go to your doctor and they're like, I don't know, let's just wait and see what happens. What is biotech going to cure a couple things here? Or is anything different?
Yeah, so I'll put my biotech investor cap on, which by the way is interlinked with why I went into the pet food space and the pet space as well. I think that we can start solving problems once we understand the data behind our biology better. Mm-hmm. Dogs and cats, we can improve their nutrition and therefore improve their health over longer term periods of time. Right? So that is one step. Separately, biotech itself. So we're starting to see cures coming, which is really exciting. So I don't know if you've heard of there's a drug called for hepatitis C. Yeah. So there's a company called Gilead that came out with a drug for hepatitis C. It cures the disease.
That's good. It's been a while since we've heard one of those.
It has
Good
been a
for
while.
Gilead, yeah.
Yeah. So Gilead's a huge company
Sure,
now,
of course.
but this really was a breakthrough drug. So hepatitis C has been a huge problem. It's actually led to chronic infection of hepatitis C. Has led to liver cancers and all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
Huge cause of liver cancer, especially in Asia. And this drug now appears to remove all traces of or all signs of the virus.
And can you take it and then be done with it?
You can take it and be done with it. It's like a course. I think it's like 8 weeks course of therapy. I can't remember. It's weeks. It's literally weeks of therapy.
Best.
Yeah, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. And then disease appears to not come back. So we're starting to move into a new era in biotech as we understand ourselves, where we can actually be curative. And so what I'm excited about is where we're going, not just on the curative side, but also on the regenerative side too. Like, how do we rebuild failing organs? How do we regenerate failing organs or failing limbs or joints? And so these are, kind of a two-pronged approach. Things that go wrong, you want to fix, right? So things like cancer. How do we? Some of the new CAR T cell therapies are literally being. I call them curative because if you have an 80 to 90% chance of curing someone of a cancer, I call that curative. Even though clinically it's curative, but some people unfortunately still pass away.
Yeah.
That's just the complexity of our biology.
Right.
But we're seeing better and better cures coming for cancer, regenerative medicine, lots of interesting areas.
Is there a technology? Like, I know there's there's a couple firms, Lux Capital and DCVC, who just do like intense stuff. In fact, the Lux Capital, he said this publicly, I forget his name, but one of his big investment theses is he thinks that there will be talking about pets.
Yeah.
In the next 10 years, he believes somebody is going to invent something. He thinks there must be more to like your pet, barking and you saying, he's barking. Is he hungry? Guessing.
Yeah.
He thinks that there's actually somebody who will do some form of interface that will bring information about your animal's state. I'm happy, I'm unhappy to people.
Yep.
I don't know what that is. But so they do wacky stuff, but hard tech stuff. But one of their theses about
I think was that Josh Wolf?
Probably.
Yeah.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
That the compute stuff is helping the biotech, and that's going to help you cure a thing or two, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, compute and biotech are interlinked. Like, these two things are technology and the innovation that we've had in the tech industry and Silicon Moore's Law, robotics, everything is helping us in the biotech industry. These are not separate things. So we have to bring down the walls between the different scientific disciplines. Yeah. And I consider technology one of those scientific disciplines and meld them.
Yeah. Which is a classic thing that happens in science, like option pricing in finance. There were some scientists who just happened to become a Wall Street guy, but had previously been a physicist. And he was like, oh, there's a heat transfer calculation that would basically help you price options. Yeah. So it could be that you take a tech computing guy and bring him to biotech and go, oh, your genome is like just a data set. We'll crunch it. And what problem are you trying to solve, like cancer or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, we've already started to do that, right? So there was this company that we funded while I was at Indiebio called Scaled Biolabs, and one of the co-founders is actually Brendan. He's an astrophysicist. Yeah. And so he had this concept. He was like, look, we use all these complex algorithms to look at all the stars around us, right, in the universe. Right. Why can't we use those algorithms to look at cells? And so flip it inwards to look at the millions and billions of cells that are in our bodies or outside of our bodies when you're growing cells. And so he found a way with his co-founder, Drew, to look at the cells themselves and then rapidly sort them to identify how to create new types of stem cells, whether it's neurons to replace dopaminergic neurons to replace the neurons that die in Parkinson's, or all sorts of other really interesting applications.
Right. And what do you think? I've been thinking on this. Like in California, we've now legalized marijuana in terms of kind of bio. Yeah. And my experience with it, I'm kind of curious where you think that's all maybe going to go. I also feel it's a very odd. I'm not sure like you hear these things from people that like CBD, for example, does amazing things, which I think which is great. My experience has been I went into like one of these dispensaries, like a nice one. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, it's legal. Well, I want to mellow out on a whatever Sunday night. And the experience was so complex. They were like, there's indica and there's sativa and there's CBD and there's THC and there's cookies and there's tinctures and I was like, I don't know what. It's not like I want a glass of wine. Whether you want red or white. Yeah. The sort of complexity of it and the delivery mechanisms, like I'm wondering how quickly people are taking to it, just given the complexity of it.
Yeah, so CBD and all the cannabis related stuff that is a breakthrough product category. I think it's just going to continue to grow. We've already seen like record tax revenue from Canada as they legalized it.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but where it gets interesting is understanding the cannabis and the cannabinoids at a molecular level. Like, what are they actually doing?
What are they actually doing?
Yeah, well, so this is actually what a lot of people don't know is that the cannabinoid receptors exist in our brain. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is it is doing things to our brain. We don't fully understand. So, when something gets you high, that's a certain type of like THC, right? Yeah. Other cannabinoids make you sleepy, right? Mm-hmm. And those are other types of cannabinoids.
Right.
And so there is a diversity of cannabinoids in that plant. And so in the cannabis, in cannabis and in hemp, as we start to understand the different types of cannabinoids, we can start to create new types of products that are tailored to individual people and their own brains, because everyone's neurochemistry is very different.
Right. And when we get back to why it's just one plant, one drug? Like, mm-hmm. if we're heading down that, like initially when ecstasy, my understanding is when the drug ecstasy, MDMA, came out, mm-hmm. it had initially been like some guys at Harvard who had realized that when you take LSD, mm-hmm. that certain barriers were, in addition to just tripping and seeing Aztec temples, certain barriers just kind of dropped. And so they were using it so they created something that basically had the barrier dropping part, mm-hmm. without the hallucinations, that they were using for counseling, like, mm-hmm. between two mm-hmm. people who are just, marriage counseling, like, let's drop the inhibitions and have a conversation there. Like, that's, they were trying to achieve something. Yeah. Why not try to achieve, psychedelic? Like, why stop at the marijuana?
No, exactly right. So I think that the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see. So we've seen marijuana and cannabis has been actually a very successful product. I think where you're kind of hinting where the next revolution is going to happen is in the psychedelics.
Right, because that seems to be the other. I mean, if you think of your friends who you grew up, like my smartest, most successful friends seem to have had a phase of psychedelics somewhere in there, whatever it was.
And so when you look at the data, so I would argue that the war on drugs set back neuroscience many decades. Yeah. Because we banned a whole bunch of psychedelics that were neuroactive. Yeah. They work on the brain.
Which is, by the way, is a really odd thing. Like, just, if you just think about it, like, you wake up in the morning and you go, I don't want people to trip and see Aztec temples. Like, why? Like, which is a weird thing to care about. Yeah. Like, maybe it's because it's a threat to religion or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But it just seems like an odd thing to care about. I don't know.
In the U.S., we seem to do that, right? We have a thing about prohibition. We kind of like it. And so, we prohibited alcohol. Right. So, so crazy that we prohibited alcohol. And so psychedelics, when you look at psychedelic science, there are a bunch of great organizations doing research like MAPS that are doing great research on psychedelic science. When I say psychedelic science, I'm not talking about meditating in a temple. Right. I'm talking about people with serious diseases like PTSD, soldiers that come back from war who've been given MDMA and actually it helps their PTSD. Yeah, right. Or people with severe depression who actually have treatment-resistant depression, who some of them have been cured by taking magic mushrooms. Yeah. Right. They actually become undepressed after failing normal drugs like normal antidepressants that are prescribed to them. Yeah. So this is an area where we need to bring vast resources. I think things will change as the FDA starts to approve and legalize some of these products. Yeah.
Are you ever just amazed at what you get to do? This just seems incredible to me. Like, just curing things, drugs going to the next level, like animals being healthier. Do you ever just wake up and go, this is pretty cool?
It's kind of like a dream, right? It's one of those things where I remember hoping and wishing that I could get involved in doing and actually creating these types of new products and helping people, helping animals. Yeah. And we can do it with biotech. That's the beauty of biotech. Yeah. It is us. It's our programming. And so I think that, I'm excited for the next generation of entrepreneurs who scientists who become entrepreneurs, because we're going to have more and more tools that are powered by technology, that are powered by AI, machine learning, that are powered by innovations and discoveries we make today.
What do you see of people out of school, like the class of people who would otherwise go to start a chat app or something like that, going into biotech? Are they I was intimidated by it. I thought computers were not that hard when I was in college. I thought biology was insane. I thought it was hard.
So we're already seeing this. So what's happened is I think if you provide examples, so it's really easy to forget that tech, IT, information technology was once the domain of only professors and ivory towers.
Yeah.
Right. In the 1960s, there were punch cards, no screens, no mice, and it was PhDs and professors who were developing tech products or technologies. Developing mainframes and various other things. And so as we consumerize these products, suddenly we had a massive diaspora of people who would never have been involved in technology who could just go and do a degree and learn how to program a computer. And now they use the tools and the platforms that were built before to make better and better products.
Did science fiction books head you on this path at all? Like that kind of happened to me where I started reading science fiction and I didn't get into tech necessarily, a little bit from the science fiction, also from then understanding the people who were reading science fiction, which was like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and guys like that, Mark Andreessen certainly. Did that kick you up?
100%, 100%. So there were some old school authors like Richard Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, who talked about these visions of the future that really it was humanity. It was kind of positive vision mixed with some drama, but it was this positive vision of humanity expanding out to the universe and using tools and technologies. Ursula Le Guin, who kind of explored biological form. Yeah. So I found her a very fascinating author over the years. Charles Stross, who's a more recent author, who explored the singularity. Yeah. Right. So the era when physical scarcity was no longer existed. We can build anything we want in physical space instead of just digital space. Right. And so I really think that that's where biology starts to play a part, where we can actually say, hey, we have a lump of carbon, we have some hydrogen over here. What can we make with this? Right. And we can use biology because biology does molecular assembly, right? It takes atoms, puts them together in interesting forms, and we can use biology to do that. So we can use biology to bring together, I would argue, the end of scarcity, right? Abundance. My old boss, Peter Diamandis, over at X Prize, he talks about abundance. Like this is the future that we're actually building. Yeah.
What's the one that maybe I've had in the sci-fi book where like there's like millions of societies spread across the galaxy, like across all of space.
Is this Isaac Asimov's? And
it might be. I can't remember.
Because he wrote a book about the long time, and so how empires rise and fall. And then there were historians that basically tracked that. There are many space novels that...
It's kind of weird that they hold up okay, too. Like, you read some books that are written in the 60s and 70s. Larry Niven, I loved. Like, Ring World was fabulous.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And, like, they weren't... I don't know. It's not that they got it totally right. Yeah. Like, most of them didn't really have the internet. Mm-hmm. Like, you'd be in the future, Star Trek, and you basically have radios. Yeah. But for some reason, it seems okay that they didn't... that they didn't nail it exactly. They had the vision right, like the ideas basically right. Yeah. Like the amount of time it takes to do interstellar travel. And
if you look at authors like Arthur C. Clarke, right? He predicted geostationary orbit.
Right.
Right before we had satellites up in space. Yeah. Right. And so for me, I view science fiction writers and authors as guides to our future. Right. They allow us to imagine the possibilities, and then that unlocks it for the rest of us that follow, so that we can say, hey, that's really interesting. Could we do that? Yeah. And it inspires imagination. It inspires the willingness to at least try. Yeah. Try to build it.
It drives me crazy. I feel like there should be more good science fiction on TV right now. Like
I 100% agree.
They cancel like they either do really bad versions of it, or they cancel like they had Flash Forward and V, which I loved. Like, they all get canceled. Yep. Like the Expanse was kind of tough for me to get into. Yeah, but people like that.
And the Expanse is going to get even more interesting. So I saw the Expanse, and I'm really glad that Jeff Bezos actually saved the Expanse. So now it's going to Amazon. It was actually going to get canceled on Sci-Fi Channel.
That's such a nerd thing to do.
It's a super nerd thing to do. Yeah, so it's great to see that there's nerds out there that are willing to save, sci-fi. But the Expanse is there's heavy biotech sci-fi. It's near-term biotech. I mean, when they eat, every time I'd watch it, I got inspired to read the whole series. So I read the whole series of The Expanse. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it.
I haven't.
It's a great book and great story. But while they're eating, they're eating fungi and noodles. And they're eating they're eating like cultured and vat grown protein in space. And I'm there, and they're literally saying, I'm eating fungi noodles. And I'm like, that's what we're building.
That's the one. I'll tell you one more. The 3-body problem. I read. The smartest people I know read it. I don't get it.
It's fascinating. Yeah,
I'm like, maybe I'm not smart enough. I don't know. I read the first one. I was like, I don't know.
But I think this is why we need science fiction that expands your mind, because that's exactly what we want. We want concepts that are hard to understand. 3-body problem I'm not as familiar with. I've watched the movie that came out, which I loved, and it was fascinating.
Wait, it's a Chinese movie, right?
Yeah, well, no, it's an American movie. So they made the author of 3-body problem wrote a short story around aliens that come to this planet, and they don't exist in the same way that we exist. We have this temporal stream which goes only forward, whereas these aliens actually see both the past and the future at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a fascinating
Is
idea.
it a good movie?
It's a great movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's it called?
I've forgotten the name of the movie. Yeah, but we can, I guess we can put it on the podcast later. But so yeah, I mean, there's all these interesting spaces for us to explore. Like there's one book by Richard Morgan called Altered Carbon.
Yeah.
The Netflix made like a TV series. It was an okay TV series, but to be honest, the book itself was more mind blowing. Yeah. I don't know if you've read.
Yeah, you've read it.
Okay,
fabulous one.
That was a mind, because it talked about how we engineer our biology, how we engineer bodies.
Yeah.
Like it got me thinking of like what would happen if we could run both our mind on 2 different bodies.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of mind blowing to even think about.
I got to pick up a sci-fi book. I love it every time I do it. It's so cool. What I feel like we've done this thing, but I want to ask you: do you think like sort of a post-animal economy?
Yes,
eating them, not
post-animal bioeconomy.
Like, do you think it's gonna have like either politically or culturally or technically? Yeah. Is it gonna happen, and like how quick do you think it's gonna happen?
Yeah, it's definitely gonna happen. Quick is hard to predict. I mean, I think there's a saying that I love, which we often overestimate how much progress we'll make in a year, and often underestimate. I think it's a year, and then we often underestimate how much progress we make in 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it's when I look at it, I'm like, in 10 years, everything will be dramatically different. So we will have clean meat on the market. We will have lab-grown brewed meat that's not made from slaughter. So this will be meat, real meat, not fake meat, but slaughter-free.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a whole bunch of other products. And I think what's going to happen is if I project forward, so there's going to be a bunch of resistance. We've already seen this with the cattle ranchers and various other things. They're starting to heavily try and regulate the clean meat industry to stop it from coming on.
It seems crazy to me. Although I say this, John Oliver makes the joke that like Crunch Fitness has more members than the NRA. Like, are there that many damn cattle ranchers? Like,
not that many, but the thing is, they're powerful and they're politically powerful. And so what we've seen with legacy industries, and I describe cattle ranching and factory farms as legacy industries, and dairy as legacy industries, because these are industries that are being replaced by technology. Biology is technology. Yeah. And so biology, the new type of domestication, which is the domestication of cells, is disrupting the old domestication, the first domestication, when we domesticated wild animals and turned them into farm animals. Yeah. Right? So it's disrupting. It's just 10,000 years later. Yeah. Right? That disruption. Wow. Yeah.
Exciting times.
Very exciting.
All right. Well, how do people get in touch with you?
So I'm on Twitter, at Ryan Bethencourt. You can always tweet at me, shout at me, argue with me about various things. It's always fun. And then I'm available on most social media channels. Definitely check out wildearth.com. We're selling products there. And if you're looking to raise money, you can always reach out to me, especially hard tech, biotech. Happy to help and connect you with the rest of the team at Babel.
Thank you so much for doing this.
All right, thanks, Kent.
All right,
it's a pleasure.
This has been the Something Venture podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. See you next time.